Space, the final frontier. Space Station Ashland sits on the edge of Federation space with its companion ship, the USS Delamis Christian. The space around them is full of mystery and strange wonders, where secrets are kept and danger lurks around every corner. The crew of the Delamis Christian must navigate treacherous waters as they work to protect the Federation. But as they peer into the unknown, they will discover that the line between friend and foe is not always clear. They will be tested like never before and will face challenges that will push them to their limits. Join us on this adventure as we explore the farthest reaches of space and uncover the hidden truths that lie within the shadows. Tabletop Journeys presents Star Trek Preservations.
Welcome, travelers, and welcome aboard Tabletop Journeys, cast interviews for Season 2 of Star Trek Preservations. Hi, I'm Lewanika. I'm your GM storyteller for many of, but not all of, these wonderful and amazing episodes that we've spent 2 years working, 2 years plus at this point. And I am joined tonight with my co-host, Josh, the other GM slash storyteller for the episode's plots and the stories on the show. Josh, say hi. Hailing frequencies are open.
Everybody? I know I don't appear on this side of the microphone very often for folks that check out Preservations, but yeah, like I may only run like 20 or 30% of the episodes because my schedule is stupid. But yeah, Lewanika and I talk all the time about this show and about what we want to throw at the players and what we think would be entertaining radio. You may not hear me often, but you feel my presence.
We're going to dig into it when we talk about the season from the GM and storyteller chair, not unlike the captain's chair of a starship vessel, deciding what missions to run, what order of the missions to run, what themes to really bring out, what challenges to pit against our team or have our crew be pitted against is critical to the STA game and the fun that we have with our players. And we talk a lot about the game, and so the plan is not to get into too many mechanical details today.
Yeah.
That I'm sure we're going to touch on a couple from time to time.
Sure.
But one of the most important things is STA almost more so than any other role-playing game that we play typically or that we even write for is a situation where the storyteller is actively playing the game, not just managing the flow of the story. And that makes it immeasurably fun. Josh, you want to speak on that?
Sure.
Your take on that element of the game?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point to go ahead and bring up, because that's one of the things that we love most about being storytellers. It's why we call ourselves storytellers as opposed to like DMs and GMs and stuff like that, is because I won't necessarily speak for you, but I think that we're in agreement on this, that I view myself as another player at the table whenever I am running a game, right? It doesn't really matter what the system is. I think that all of us at the table are there to have that collective experience. All of us are there to have the fun of playing the game. It's just that it's akin to playing the banker in Monopoly, right? I'm still playing the game. I'm just playing a slightly different game than everybody else at the table, but all of us win when the story is successful and when the game is successful and when everyone is having fun and a good time and everything like that. So I do love that about STA. It is far more active, and I think that since running so much STA, I've noticed in my home game, which is not STA, but I have noticed that the influence of a active running someone actively running and someone actively participating from behind the screen is really important. I've noticed it like leaking into my home game, to the fact that like other players at my game who have either played at my tables before or whatever have noticed that, oh, you're way more active now than you used to be thing, which I think is something that for one, I'm really happy about. And for two, that I think probably goes back to like our LARPing days, when as a LARP storyteller, you've really got to be super duper active just because of the number of things that you've got going on at one time. I like that STA brings that out a little bit and has made that transition easy and better.
Yeah, I truly think that STA has mechanized the ability for the storyteller, the director, as it's called in some systems, the GM, the DM, to have fun and be a player. We're just a different kind of player. We have a different role as we're playing. I love being that player coach kind of role within the game system. With our voice cast here on Preservations, what makes that even better is most of us started playing the game at the same time,
Mhm.
right? Really, Joe playing Commander Tobor is the only person who had played the game prior to us starting
Yeah.
this show. So we are all learning the game as we go, and it is wonderful to have when you're running the story, we're in the thick of it, somebody who has a really good command of the game. I think Dave had
Yep.
been a GM for the game. So having and Dave as subject matter experts on the technicalities and the mechanics of the game has been very helpful. They lean on each other. We lean on them. And as we've grown, Adam has very quickly become a subject matter expert as well, as Adam is wont to do. We've known Adam for far many more years than any of the three of us want to
Yeah.
actually say out loud.
Several rings in
But
that tree. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But and same thing with Glenn even. It's we have a cast that is filled with people who learn things very quickly. With Lacey coming into the cast a year in, I loved the interview we just aired last week with
Yep.
Lacey. It really highlighted how quickly she picked up the system. All the highlights that we've always talked about are great. To have a brand new player start 10 full sessions in. It's actually probably closer to 12 or 13 because some of our episodes were multi-session or
Mhm.
what have you. But 12 or 13 sessions in on the game, a brand new player to the system who has role-playing experience,
Sure. Yeah.
it has learned, picked up significant expertise. She is exceptionally good at this game and the things that she does, and there are things that she
Yep.
doesn't ask questions about anymore that I still do, and I am that is not lost on me. And I
Yeah.
love the fact that this is the kind of game that is that easy to pick up, that easy to get good at. I was not this good at 5e in 12 sessions in.
No, that's a no. Yeah.
There
Yeah.
are those who will say that,
No,
but yeah,
I mean, Lacey is stinking brilliant anyway, and whoever suggested that she join the preservations crew really deserves a pay raise and should be. So you can point at yourself. No, I've known Lacey for years before she ever played this game. I don't know. I
you
don't know why you're
did,
pointing at.
you
I don't
did.
know why you're pointing at yourself on that.
Because I think I'm the one who asked. In fact, if I recall
You've never
correctly,
met Lacey before this.
I know, but I heard her on Steve's show. And
That's right.
and I
Yeah, yeah.
remember saying, Josh, why would you say, hey Lacey, why don't you meet our friend Steve and be on his show when we could really use her on our show? You
You want
remember
to go
that
ahead and take.
conversation?
No, I do not remember that conversation, and I think
Yeah,
that you're
good,
inventing it.
good. Yeah.
So that's
Hey,
yeah.
if we're gonna shine the truth, Josh, no one's shining better than you. Let's get you some turtle wax, baby, because your car's looking fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So here we are arguing over which one of us wanted Lacey on the. And here's the truth. We always want the absolute best players we can at our tables. We have an amazing cast. I have said it multiple times on air. I say it all the time when I'm at conventions. Our voice cast is one of the finest collection of role players I've had at a single table ever. As a storyteller, I can't ask for more or for a better crew. The fact that we are consistent, we're able to play, we're able to have fun, we're able to enjoy, and everybody is into their characters and wants to build a story cannot be beaten,
Yeah.
cannot be dismissed. I love it. Absolutely love it. So,
Yep. No, I totally agree. Totally agree. So,
all right. So, with that, I think we should jump into some questions. This is
yeah,
an interview.
I think so.
So, we are going to interview each other here. So, a little bit
Well,
of weirdness for Tabletop Journeys, a little something that we don't do usually is interview each other.
yeah. Can't
So,
really do
I've
that in
got a
public.
couple questions for Josh. He's got some questions for me. And we're going to chat it out and see what
Yeah,
we've got.
I love
And
it.
for the audience, if you've got questions after we're done that you would like us to answer, that's why we have comments, whether you've got us on YouTube, whether you've got us on Spotify or any other platform, or you just want to chat with us, have at it. Let us know what
Love to
you
hear
want
it.
to hear. If we didn't answer your questions, you better be asking your questions so we can get you those answers. With that, actually, you know what? I let us off today. Josh, I want you to start
Mm,
off today. Why don't you
okay.
throw me your question and let me see what you got?
All
Fire
right.
away.
I want to go ahead and start. We talked about our very collaborative process about throwing stuff together, throwing these plot points together, how we go ahead and weave the tapestry of the story. So I'm going to start with that question. We've laid out a bunch of story points over the last couple of years. The seasons 1 and seasons 2 were very much like an A side and a B side of a great album. They complemented each other really well, and the story was not really done until the end of season 2. But some of the plot points were connected, some of them were not. So, what was the best connection or deduction that the crew made for you this year? What was the thing that they finally came across that you're like, oh, this was a throwback from season 1. You caught it. You got me. You found it. You found the secret. And what was the best connection that the crew made that altered your vision of the overarching plot throughout season 2?
It actually happened in several different ways, which I thought was interesting, and I did not anticipate it. Quite honestly, Joe, Adam, Glenn, Dave, and Lacey, all very separately, picked up little things in some of those season 1 episodes that really came to the fore in season 2 that led to where the crew as a whole understood the mission and knew what they were getting at. And I didn't anticipate that. I really was looking for that one smoking gun that
Right.
one person would have the aha moment. But the reality is, everybody had a piece, and the way they communicated in game, in session, was picture perfect for figuring it out. If I were to pick a single moment that surprised me that they made all of the connections really well, it would probably be Adam connecting some of the things that were going on Soltec 4
Yep.
with the various entities doing their things and how that connected with the overall Zunian plot and the Epsilon species were doing with the Zunians. Um, I thought that was really cool because I didn't anticipate them getting that information at the time they got it. Like
Yep.
in my head, I had other scenes rough planned or sketched for later on to provide a little bit more information. I was thinking checks that they're going to make in the episodes following going to Zunia might lead to that information, but they made those connections. Glenn's dogged persistence of the traitorous security officer really forced our hands as storytellers to push some of
That's a
that stuff out quite a bit faster than we had
that's a great way
intended.
of putting that. Yeah.
And so much to say that there were mid-session times where both of us are like Kermit typing the keyboard to say, "Oh my God, they got this, and we weren't expecting it.
Yeah, yeah.
What do
Oh
we
my
do
God,
now?" And,
what did you do
yeah,
last month? I haven't listened to that episode yet. Tell me what they
yeah,
did.
yeah. I need the answers now because I know you weren't expecting them to ask the question until next month, but
Guess
Holmes are
what?
asking ahora. And so many moments, everybody had them in their own special ways, and yet they were all so wonderfully character driven and
Yeah.
from the individual character perspective. It was just an amazing thing.
You know, the other day I heard about the fact that there's like basically in the NFL, there's like a group chat with Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and some of the other like really elite running backs where they just like sit there and chat about everything that goes on in their lives and everything that different reads in games and different strategies for running against different defenses. And I was like, oh my God, I wish that I was in that group chat. That's got to be the best group chat ever. I can only imagine what
Yeah.
that was like. Maybe second only to the group chat with the Preservations cast because for folks out there listening, the stuff that happens on air, I need to insist upon this fact that this is not a scripted show. The cast does not know what's going to happen every single episode. So the discoveries that you hear them make on air are absolutely legit, but they are also very heavily based on conversations that they are all having in between sessions about things that they found or little hints that they figured out and stuff like that. Like they throw a bunch of spaghetti against the wall that they very quickly peel off when they realize it's or they very quickly let fall to the floor when they realize that is actually not very good. And they very neatly and tidily distill the things that they want to do in various episodes. I've had that happen more than once where it's, I've got my mission brief in front of me. I've written out all my A points, my B points, my C points. I've got all my plot ties and everything like that. And the very first thing that happens is Joe says, okay, Josh, before we get into whatever you've got going on tonight, we've got to go ahead and get some bleepity bleep done. And then the next thing I know, we're 2 hours in and I haven't even started with my plot yet. I'm like, I don't know. I'm not gonna be able to get through this. This ain't gonna work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've had that happen more than once, and it's awesome when it happens because it's like now then that the five of them are really thinking through what we've put them through. So that's been a hoot.
Yeah, absolutely. That has happened in at least three of the episodes that
Yeah.
I've run. Actually, probably more like four this
Yeah.
past season and into season three. Actually, largely happened going into season three as well.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
just, and just on a semi-professional kind of, we're all unpaid folks doing a thing. The cast is also really keyed into having a great show for the audience. We re-recorded a bit with season three because there's a little bit of confusion going when we started the open one of the parts of season three, and the cast collectively said, "Hey, we'd really, if we can, get a bit of a redo on that bit so it comes out a little smoother." It didn't really change what happened, didn't change any of the details,
Yeah.
but they were like, that wasn't great radio for folks. We know we're playing a game, we know we're
Yeah.
having fun, but we really want this show to be exciting and fun for folks.
Yeah.
And they are so loving and nurturing of this show and of our audience. I just can't express how wonderful it is to have such great partners on air helping you and me put a thing out there to show our creativity and show our love for gaming, show our love for each other, and our
Yep.
love for the Star Trek IP. It's wonderful. It could be, hey, I played my game, I threw my dice, I'm good.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
be, and that would be
Yeah.
fine. That would be
Yep.
fine. The beautiful mess in and of itself is fine. But the fact that it's more than that to them just warms my heart.
Yep. I agree.
All right. So I got a question for you here, and we've done a lot of episodes, and you we mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
We're not getting into mechanics here, but that said, I really want to get your thoughts on season two. I want to hear, what of the episodes you ran, what were the parts of the story, and not just the episodes you ran, but also the significant parts and story beats of the season as a whole that you had a heavy hand
Yeah.
in or a large part in crafting. What are your overall thoughts on the season? What are your highlights, lowlights? What are the things that when you think back on season two, what
Yeah.
comes to your mind? What would you want to share with the audience tonight?
Yeah, so I remember when we first started planning season two, and you said that basically you wanted to wind down the Epsilon plot by the end of the season. And I thought that you were effing nuts. I thought there is no way that we are going to be able to satisfactorily wind that. And I think I probably told you that at that point. I'm like, there is no way we can do that in one season. There's no way. There's so much going on. There is so much that they would need to go ahead and find. There's so much that they at that point, at the end of season one, let's not forget, they had not discovered the true nature of Epsilon Protocol on the ship. They had not even really discovered what the Epsilon species was, or what they were doing, or how they functioned. They really didn't know anything about them. They did not know Pritchard's involvement. They did not know. They knew nothing.
They didn't know Tobor's involvement.
They didn't know Tobor's involvement. Like they. Okay, let's fully admit here. We didn't know Tobor's involvement at the end of season one either. So let's go ahead and, if we're really peeling back the curtain here,
Come on. I was trying for my George R. R. Martin moment. I had it all planned.
Yeah,
All planned.
no. We didn't know Tobor's involvement at that point either. It very quickly evolved. However, at the very beginning of the season two, we didn't know it either. If we're being totally honest here,
We did put it together several episodes before Tobor knew.
That's
But
true. That's true. That's true.
not as many in front to say we were prognosticators.
Yeah, because I really think too that his involvement in the whole Epsilon thing was a natural evolution of where the plot was going. So I think it made sense that that's what happened.
Yep.
Anyway, I remember thinking at the beginning of the season, like, how the hell are we going to do that? Like, what exactly? We've got this whole subplot with the Klingons that ends in season one with a big cliffhanger. So that was going to take at least one episode to go ahead and wrap up. And then just figuring out what it was that we were going to do. And then when I looked on the schedule and saw that I was going to have the double episodes 4 and 5, I was like, that's where we do it. That's where we can give them something big, something really big, to go ahead and really move that plot forward. That was like the cornerstone episode, I think, of tying this together when we introduced the Zunians all together. And man alive, we talk a lot about how you and I plot and plan these things and the amount of conversation that we have about everything like that. Those two episodes, which were always designed to go ahead and be a part one, part two, even though the players didn't know that, they didn't realize that episode 4 was gonna end on a cliffhanger like it did. But we talked about that a lot
Yeah.
about what was actually happening at the array, what kind of information were they going to be able to get from the array about what happened, how were the Zunians going to act, all the things that really made that episode so special and very right and properly made the players think that something hinky was going on, and give them enough thread to go ahead and pull on, as they can watch the sweater unravel in front of them, right? And just have it
Yeah.
keep going and going. Because every thread that they pulled on, more of the sweater fell apart, and until eventually they wound up with this pile of thread at their feet. That was the episode for me that I was like, yeah, this is where this has to happen, because it's the middle of the season. It's got to happen here. And that's when the fun stuff for you and I begins, because then once we get that out of the way, we can take it wherever we want to go. Wherever the players want to go, we can go ahead and take it in a bazillion different directions. But for me in particular, again, I won't speak for you on this one, but for me in particular, I needed to know how they were going to respond to that. Episode 10, when they're facing the tribunal, does not happen without the things that happen in episodes 4 and 5. It's very critical, not only wrapping up that plot line, but it became really critical in the direction that the ship was going to take as a whole. Who were these characters really gonna be? That was the first time that I was like, yep, we've been going for about a season and a half now. Now we're going to give them a for real test to see who their characters actually are. We're going to put the right kind of pressure on them and see how they respond. And man alive, was that an awful lot of fun to see how that happened.
Oh, immeasurable fun. You nailed it 100%. I can tell you for a fact, when we started planning season two, there was no plan for a tribute. That was born out of the incidences and the events of episodes 4 and 5 with the Zunians. And it was, there has to be a reckoning for what went down here, and it has to be within the season. So at that point, the decision was, and how do we tie that in with everything else? That was a thought process that I had, and I started thinking, when is it going to go? And it was probably a good month or 2 months before I figured out the when and the where. But once I had that set, I'm like, yes, we knew that season two was going to end in this big cliffhanger. We knew that we wanted the bad guys to show up on the doorstep and do the thing. But what we didn't know is how we were going to start that off.
Yeah, how do we get
Beginning
there?
that with tribunal questioning, where the players and their characters were not even sure, are we being court-martialed, or are we being, what's happened, do we have Starfleet careers anymore, what's on the line, are our rights being violated, and all those other things. In the same way that the Zunian episode shined a spotlight on who each of the characters were and the way they interacted with what was going on, that tribunal episode did exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
We saw who they were then, and then the tribunal was to bookend the season, was them saying, "I know who I am, and this is what you're going to get." Their
Yeah.
characters were saying that to Starfleet intelligence, and from there it goes on, and it was just amazing. And on the heels of all that hype and fun, the alarm bells go off, and now the bad guys are here. Go do your job.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So much fun.
Yep.
So much
Yep.
fun.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. All right. So I guess it's my turn then to go ahead and ask the next question here. And this is one I think I know my answer to this question, which is always a fun way to ask it here. And I want to get your answer here. But who was the player or character that most surprised you this year, and why?
I would have to say Lacey. And on the meta level, just mastery of the game as
Hmm.
fast as it was mastered. In my opinion, far faster than I mastered it. I just find impressive and laudable and amazing. From a character perspective, she built a character who was new to being an officer. She built a Lieutenant JG, had all the traits and stuff of a younger officer who's learning this thing, but on a small ship, that junior officer is actually in command of folks. She's a department head as a Lieutenant JG. That doesn't happen on a bigger ship, right? Her portraying the character's uncomfortability with command in various spots. And then when we finally got to her piece of episode 10, was really satisfying
Yeah.
as a storyteller to see the character say, look, this is what we're doing. And prior to that, just the conversations of the character dealing with Lieutenant, all of those things. Those were situations where I'm like, yeah, this character, the character has grown, the character has moved into a new echelon, and being able to say, almost like a lower decks Boimler kind of episode and Tendi kind of situation where it's like, hey, you're in charge now. You got to do the thing. And watching that junior officer, that lower decker, effectively step up and be a bridge officer, be actually in command of the DC, was
Yeah.
really good. And it doesn't hurt that in that episode, I got to portray some of my favorite fictional characters of all time, Porthos, the Kurgan, and I even get to do a terrible Southern accent trying to be Chuck Yeager and whatnot. But definitely, I would say Lieutenant Nealon was the character that surprised me the most, and in such a pleasant way. And Lacey as a player was just amazing, and really impressed me. I don't even think surprise is the answer. I knew she was a good role player just from talking with you about her role playing pedigree and whatnot. And I knew
Sure.
from the first couple conversations when we were session zero and building a character, this was a solid role player. But I was just really impressed with the way that character came out and fit the
Yeah.
story. I've probably done more stuff with the ship and felt more closer to the crew of the DC beyond the bridge crew by way of Lacey's character than many of the others. And that would be my answer there.
I think that is a really great answer. And if you hadn't said Narila, I was going to go ahead and say Narila, so I will instead go with the other one that I kept going back and forth. And a lot of it has to do with the interplay that Narila has with Tanari that really sets Tanari out for me. And I say this not to go ahead and say all of our players are amazing. The things that Joe does with his alternate character are fantastic. The what Adam brings to Ocean, and just even like when Ocean went back to Andoria for just a minute and then came back with a pet, like those little details. I remember running the scene where the shuttle, because I think that the when Ocean came back, it was between episodes 4 and 5, so the ship was in
Yeah.
Epsilon Protocol at the time, and he needed special clearance to go ahead and land his shuttle in the ship. And then the security crew that basically was not debrief was basically inspecting the ship when he got back, only to go ahead and find his Andorian rabbit in the shuttle at the time because he hadn't had the chance to go ahead and tell anybody that he was bringing it home. Those kind of things like that, like it's such fantastic moments. But for me, Tanari continues to be a force that drives so many last minute decisions that we need to make from the other side of the screen because of the way that he uses his daring attributes to really make wackadoodle decisions that should not work and either fail spectacularly or succeed spectacularly. There is no middle ground with Tanari.
Yeah.
Tanari is never in like a middling, oh yeah, it worked. I got what I wanted. He is either fastening a nacelle onto the back of an ensign and shooting them into space, or he is accidentally blowing up a reactor somewhere. There is no in between with Tanari. And that sort of wild card maverick playstyle is something that just brings so much to the game. I said it before, this show is not scripted. The players do not know what's going to happen. But the other side of that is that neither do we. We have no idea how some of these plot points are going to come. But Tanari is the one that, like, whenever I'm writing a mission brief, I'm like, okay, here are my 4 or 5 beats that I want to go ahead and hit this episode. What do I think Tanari is going to say about any of them? Because I feel like I've got about a 50-50 shot of getting it right because Dave continues to surprise me with the things that Tanari will come flying out of his face. I think back to the very, very first episode where he, on a whim, in a collaborative role building exercise, nails the bad guy at the end of episode 1. That is a moment that will continue to go ahead and live for me forever. And I know that was season 1, and this is the very beginning. But for me, man, that was an oh shit moment, right? When 45 minutes into the first session, I'm like, Dave knows who the bad guy is. I don't know what to do about this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Dave and I, when we did his cast interview, which aired 2 weeks ago, he actually spoke about that. And his decision to be the conspiracy theorist was really born out of the character generation process
yeah,
and born out of conversations with Glenn at the time. The way Tenori came out was really much a building in play. We didn't actually build the characters in play, we actually built them to begin with. But as far as the nuance and
yeah,
the speciality of each character, that was definitely achieved in play. And when appropriate, it was, hey, I've been doing this, and I really think this is a good way for the character to lean. Are we okay with me just changing a thing to match the way I've been playing? And you and I are always yes-anding that kind of thing if it makes sense and it hasn't been used before. It doesn't change the narrative in any way that we've and generally speaking, none of our players will at, try to do anything outside of those boundaries anyway. So it's easy to say yes and when you can trust your people to never do the thing that would break the
sure.
wagon.
Not
But
irreparably anyway. They
yeah,
may push the axle to its breaking
yeah,
point.
they will stress it, but who other than Tenari is going to see what's going on in Saltek and the assault on the building and the assault on his exo and the exo's daughter and his security officer? Who other than Tenari is going to take a non-landing spacecraft
Yeah,
atmospheric at full impulse speed to impress upon the bad guys? You don't want to mess with the crew of the Delamas Christian. He full on Battlestar Galactica on Caprica 2 with a starship
yeah,
and said, "This is not how this Andorian plays."
yeah,
Shram could take notes. That's all I'm
yeah.
saying.
Well,
Shram could take notes.
and that was actually the other thing that I was going to say, and you actually reminded me of what I was going to say when you were talking about Lacey and Narila. Is that you said that she had her Boimler moment. I thought when I was listening to her cast interview in particular and her quick trek that she was having her Deanna Troy moment, where she
Yes.
very quickly went from a character that was not at the forefront of everything, but through the strength of her own character and the strength of the way that Deanna Troy was played by Marina Sirtis, that she became this force on the crew that everybody else had to go ahead and reckon with. And I think that Narila very much got that too, is that while Lacey was learning the system, I think that she was still figuring out how the buttons and knobs actually worked. And once she figured that out, she was off to the races, man. So it
Yeah.
was impressive to watch. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful question. Thank you
yeah.
for that. Moving on to my question. I actually have a two-parter because, as everybody knows, I like to cheat on interviews. But for me, there were a lot of amazing moments within season two. I talked about one of my absolute favorite, taking the DC atmospheric is
Yeah.
like really one of those. There's another great Tenari moment. Maybe we'll talk about it now. Maybe we'll talk about it at a future time. But how about you? What was your favorite moment that comes from the sessions that you
Yeah.
shepherded or were heavily involved in?
Again, so we're gonna be very honest here about what coming from behind the screen here about the kind of the process of running this game. And I have a confession. The cliffhanger at the end of episode 4. So this is Fowlers and Wait, the episode where the crew arrives at Zunian 3 and is trying to repair the array, but they're realizing that this is a species that has been at bare minimum heavily influenced by epsilon species, and they spend that episode trying to go ahead and figure that out, right? That episode ends on a cliffhanger when they brought two Zunians on board because the Zunians refused to go ahead and be teleported. They insisted that they had to be done through shuttlecraft because of the epsilon species issue, right? The conceit here is that because the way that the crew responded to the Zunians, where they were like, there is a medical issue. These creatures have epsilon species creatures inside of them, but they seem to be dormant, and we don't know what that means. Because they went down the avenue of investigating that from a medical point of view, trying to ascertain that, the entire mythology surrounding the Zunians about that whole beast within the beast, creature within the creature, creatures of two beings, all that sort of things that were so critical to kind of fleshing out the Zunians as far as who they were and why they would refuse certain things and why when the crew said, "No, you have this parasitic apocalyptic species inside of you. We need to remove it. You're in danger. And the Zunian's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. That is totally normal. Like that you are wrong. That cannot possibly be true. But because they started to go down that whole mythology very much evolved in the moment as those things were happening. So that, and I knew that episode 4 was going to end at a cliffhanger, but I never knew what the cliffhanger was going to be. I, in fact, thought the cliffhanger was going to be something very different. As the time is winding on, and as this entire, because the amount of time that they're spending on this and everything, I know that I'm eyeing the clock on the side, as it's going along here, and they're continuing to press it on the medical stuff. And eventually it gets to the point that, like, okay, I guess we're going to be sending you back to the planet then, because after all, if there's no reason for us to keep you, we're not going to keep you. That's when it hit me that the way to go ahead and hit the cliffhanger was to go ahead and have one of the Zunians claim asylum aboard the Dalamis Christian and use Starfleet's rules to not send him back. He knew that in this mythology, or in the tapestry of the Zunian society that I had crafted, that if what they were saying was true, that he would no longer be welcome among his species. It was in that moment where you had this crew that was so like, Epsilon, gotta kill it, gotta kill it, gotta kill it, it's evil. And then for just a moment, for lack of a better phrase, you've got this individual who is playing on their humanity and saying, no, you don't understand. If what you're saying is true, you can't send me back. And that's where we ended. It was with him claiming asylum aboard the Dalamis Christian. And I just remember all 5 players watch, because I'm like, I get to watch it on video. I know you guys all only hear the audio, but all 5 players, when I say that, when I say, I need to go ahead and claim asylum on the Dalamis Christian, and that's where we're going to end the session for today. All 5 players, the look of shock and anger on their face that I would dare leave, I would drop that in their laps and then make them sit with it for another month until we played again. It was priceless. Peeling back the curtain, like, that is a storyline and a mythology and a species that very much was developed through play. If they hadn't gone down the road of investigating them from such a medical basis, then none of their physiology would have needed any sort of explanation. You know what I mean? But because they did, their physiology needed an explanation. It needed an explanation that made sense in the storyline. All of that was crafted at the time. And that's how that cliffhanger came to be. I had plans for 2 potential other cliffhangers. You and I had talked about them. They never even did the thing that we planned on being the cliffhanger. So yeah, that absolutely came out from the table. And that was one of those storytelling experiences that's, nope, this is just perfect. I have done the perfect thing. And now the best thing that I can do is leave it alone for right now. That was just such a riot. And it was so great to go ahead and see their faces. They really did not see that coming. I think that's probably the first time. I have surprised many players on many different occasions, but I think that might be the first time that I ever surprised Joe. And I will take that as a badge forever. So
Yeah. He is one of the folks in that same avenue as you or I, where it is rare for genre stuff to truly surprise us. It's always, I guess that was an option. May
yeah,
not have been the one I thought was number one, but it was
yeah,
always an option.
yeah,
That one hit Joe sideways. And what I loved about that, because that informed so much for the rest of the series
yeah,
and was informed by character choices during character generation.
yeah,
The reason they went the medical route and the reason they went by investigating the biology of these characters was because the science officer, Lieutenant Narila, is a biologist.
right.
Her foci were in biology.
Yep.
That's what she knows best. So this was a player who built a character to do a thing, and that thing has a specific bent. We talk about in all the Star Trek groups on Facebook and Discord and all the different places, as is talked about on continuing conversations all the time. Play to your players' strengths. Go with what your players give you. So Narilla, who has the hot hand on this investigation at this point, goes about it by looking at the biology. What can I learn about this that's going to help and assist the rest of the crew, providing my captain with the best amount of information to be able to tackle the problem? I know biology. Let's go down this route and see what avenues this leads to. So it led to that, which informed the way we built up that species and how that expressed itself in game, which then led to Joe, who was, I'm getting this species. We're stopping this right here and now. His diving deep in those moments during that particular arc was when I started forming the
Yeah.
I know Torbor's connection to the past history of
Yeah.
species
Oh,
that
yeah.
formed
That too. Yeah.
Joe had for a whole season. He did his interview from season 1 into season 2 saying, I really want to dig into Tobor's relationship with Pritchard and
With
what
Pritchard.
happened in the past. So we always knew there was something, but we had never detailed what that was. Not you, not I, and clearly we hadn't told Joe because his character was built not knowing,
Yep.
right? And it was in that moment where he was so into, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get this species, I'm going to get take care of this, that the overall theme of the show, preserving the ideals of Starfleet,
With the Federation, yeah.
comes to the fore because now, by way of this episode, you have a species that's in the crosshairs, in between Starfleet and the threat, unknowingly in the middle,
Yeah.
that have been vastly changed. And now Joe has to decide, am I going to handle this threat or am I going to preserve Starfleet's ideals? And by abstention, will the Delamas Christian and will the rest of the crew go along with that?
Yeah.
And so that arc that you brought up, based on the character choices that Joe built in at the beginning of season 1 and Lacey built in when she built her character at the beginning of season 2, led to that moment, and that moment led to the reveals we did at the back end of the season.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. It was really seminal moments in the show.
Yeah. I was really happy to be behind the wheel when that happened. And again, one of those things that just goes to show you that no matter how much you and I can plan, we don't ever really know how this is going to end. We have some ideas, but we never really know what the players are going to do and where the plot is going to take us in any given episode, which is why we have to go ahead and talk about this show a lot to go ahead and figure out what needs to happen next.
Yeah, and you know what? Wow, wasn't it better than anything we had been talking about?
Oh, totally. Oh,
Like
yeah, yeah, for sure.
wildly. Like
Oh, for sure.
you know,
Yeah.
that is not a dig on our skill at plotting and planning. We had a good episode
Yeah.
idea. We had a good plot
Yeah.
involved, but there is no way anything we had at that point for those
Yeah.
moments were going to be better than what the players
Then
brought
what
to the
happened?
table
Yeah.
that day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Excellence built by player playing.
Yep.
Is really what
Yep.
that was.
Yep. Yep. We get the credit for it because we were running the scene, but yeah, no.
I won't even take the credit. That was all them.
Yeah.
They handled it.
Well, yeah, you weren't on the episode. You don't get any credit. I might get some.
Yeah. I think I did a voiceover for the Epsilon protocol in that one. So I was there in post.
Yeah. In post does not count. so, all right. My question for you this evening. Season 2 for us was there's a big bow on a major plot, the plot basically that kind of led the show to begin in the first place, right? That one kind of aside, or maybe that's the easy answer, and you can go with that one. But which plot thread are you most happy to tie up and complete as the cliffhanger resolves itself here at the beginning of season 3? And like part B of this question is, what plot point do you think will linger for the rest of the year that isn't tied up in season 2?
I think the answer to your question is the existence of the Rama, because it was actually a season 1
okay.
reveal
Yeah.
that the crew totally missed. It wasn't an episode I ran, but we did have the character. I even had like little mini art for the character who's in command of the Rama, because that he was a prisoner in that Breen prison.
Yep.
And the players just bypass. I fully expected them, as we had talked about it, and I know you had, that they were going to talk to the prisoners
For
to see
sure.
what the prisoners knew
Yeah.
and whatnot. But they're like, we're out of here. We'll get them turned over to somebody else. And I remember saying they totally missed that. And I'm like, a prisoner from the Dominion War who was a Starfleet officer was not on board the Delamas Christian, mind you, was not recognized as a Starfleet officer by them. Was basically sent to you're freed and processing. And how can I bring this back? So bringing that character specifically back in the Rama, I knew the bad guys were going to come back, but that actually goes all the way back to season 1. I'm like, they missed this, and it was an important.
8. Yeah.
This was a very important element, and it is part of the way you and I storytell, is that we don't decide what the players do. We don't force players to take actions. We don't force players to go in door, left door, wide door, but we put the information out there. And if they pull on that thread and reveal something, that's good. Now, that has the result of sometimes creating some red herrings.
Mm-hmm.
And we're pretty good at wrapping red herrings up fast enough for, okay, that wasn't it.
Yeah.
Uh, but this was not the red herring. They had an opportunity to get a lot of info about species epsilon, about how they species epsilon connects with the breen. I had stuff written, planned based on them questioning those characters. I'm like, okay, so those 2 episodes I had planned are out. I'll just do something
Right.
else. Throw that out.
Yeah.
And to then say, I need the bad guys to show up to be more than bad guys showing up.
Yeah.
I want it to matter and I want it to hit home. And the way was I'm bringing that specific character back. That was not the character's origination arc.
Yep.
I originally wanted the character to be the one who was saved by the crew, and then it like can't stand Starfleet for reasons, but essentially to be the reward in the middle of season 1 saying, hey, you brought somebody back from the brink and they're all good. And when they weren't able to do that, I had to say, you didn't bring him back from the brink. And at this point, he's ticked. So he turned around and went in on purpose. It'll be very fun and interesting to see how that character responds to his circumstance, responds to the crew of the Dilemma's
Yep.
Christian, and the vehemence with which he applies his trade.
Yep. Yeah, this goes back to season 1, episode 8, Broken Chains, the episode that took place on the Breen mining colony, the former Cardassian mining colony occupied by the Breen, actually, that was dealing with this subspace material. And again, talk about a plot point that is born out of the player's actions or inactions, right? What we did not anticipate for that episode was the crew getting captured basically at the end of episode 7, and again as a cliffhanger type thing, and then beginning episode 8 captured by the Breen. You know what, in retrospect, I probably should have thought about this, but I did not anticipate them to basically go into that situation guns and Ushans blazing, because they were going to go ahead and take out every freaking Breen they came across to go ahead and free themselves from that situation, to the point that these prisoners that we'd had on the mining colony that were going to be really valuable information if they had go ahead and interrogated them, basically the very end of the episode, they like scooped them up, threw them in a ship, brought them back to Aslan Station, and dropped them off. And thank you very much, wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Get yourself down to Starfleet Medical, and they'll take care of you. I was like, oh, that's a whole bucket of plot right there that just got thrown out the windows. I was really glad to go ahead, and when you floated the idea of having that Betazoid captaining the Rama, I was like, yes, that is perfect. It's the best way to go ahead and bring it back, because that was the whole conceit, is that in this group of prisoners, there was a guy that was basically pretending to be one of the prisoners. That wasn't actually one of the prisoners. He was actually working for the Breen to go ahead and help them do what they were doing. So there was a kind of a mole among the prisoners down below there, and you just gave him a free ride back to Aslan Station. That works for me. Yeah, love it.
A lesson, however, that they did learn, because during season 2, Sleeping Tigers, when they rescued the Makos, they made it a point to get to know them, to integrate them, and to be
Yeah,
involved in
yeah,
their reintegration into society without even having dealt with the repercussions of the season 1 episode.
yeah,
They handled a similar but different, albeit different, but
yeah.
they handled that situation differently and better. Again, this was a fairly young bridge crew on a small ship. They were at the time we got into the episode 2 of season 1. They've only been out of the academy for 2 years.
Yep.
This is not a veteran crew. There was one veteran among them, and that's because Trill. Everybody else was relatively young. Some had escaped the junior officer kind of mold, but in general, these are younger academy grads that went to the academy and were brought back together. And the way the characters played, and the way even the things that are missed, really reflected the characters that were built and the type of story that we chose to tell
Yep.
in a very specific way, and I really liked that.
Yep. I agree.
All right.
All right, sir, bring us home. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to bring you home with a real quick question, and tell us what you're looking forward to in season 3. What challenges, if you can give us a wee bit of a sneak peek. Now, understandably, nothing beyond episode one has been formally written. We've
Yeah,
done
yeah,
a
yeah.
few basic plots at this point,
Yep.
and all of those are malleable at this point. I
Yep.
don't think anything is even close to being set in Jello at this point.
Yeah.
So beyond episode one, which we are in the middle of completing, what are you bringing to the table,
Yeah.
or what are you really jazzed about for season three?
Sure, yeah. So I know for sure that I'm going to be running sessions 3 and 5 this season, and probably session 7 also. I'm not sure if I'm going to be. I think I'm penciled in for session 9, but we may towards the end of the season, depending on how things work out, we may shift things around a little bit. But I know for sure I'm going to be doing 3, 5, and probably 7. I have sketches for episodes 3 and 5 right now already. To be honest, what I'm most excited about is the fact that now that the Epsilon species plot has shifted into kind of more of a maintenance kind of mode where it will factor as B plot throughout the season, but won't necessarily be the forefront of the forefront plot of every episode this season. That's giving me a lot more freedom to go ahead and explore new things and play with some ideas and play with some kind of out there concepts for some of these episodes and see how I can go ahead and wrap it up. So for episodes 3 and 5, I am diving deeply into my arts background. There is one episode that is based on one of Shakespeare's plays, and there is another one which is based on one of my all-time favorite I can't believe it's true stories about the theft at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. It is and if you are not familiar with that story,
You have your homework.
you have your homework. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because it is, like I said, it is one of my favorite, I can't believe that this is actually true kind of stories. And taking something like that and Star Trekifying it, for lack of a better phrase, is a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes out.
For my part, I am really looking forward to the opportunity to do some more traditional Star Trek
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
I've talked about it about Star Trek shows in general and actually television in general. When you take a 26 episode season, you can do a lot of things. But when you distill that down to a 10 episode season, you really have to hone in on the main plot.
Yep.
So, with season three being a season of change for the show and the crew and their maturity and what they're doing and their mission profiles and all of that type of thing, it does give us the opportunity to do some things that just couldn't normally fit into a 10 episode season. I'm really looking forward to that. Along those lines, I actually, and I don't think I've even told you this, so you're hearing this as we're recording for the very first
I love
time.
it. Have at it.
I have been in consultation with a scientist about some concepts and a place that the DC will be visiting, and to make it as realistic as possible within the realm of technobabble. So there is some really sci-fi technobabbly stuff that's going to make this happen, but I really tried to hone in and make it as legitimately accurate to scientific theory as possible, and that was just a choice I made. I'm like, I really was feeling this. I saw something on a YouTube short that was really interesting, and I asked a lot of questions. I've done a lot of reading. It's something I've been working on for quite a while. It's a scientist we all know and love, good friend of ours, Jason Griffin,
Yeah,
who I've been in consultation with over the past couple of months on getting that together. That element of it is actually completed. So now it's just a matter of figuring out which episode I'm going to fit that in among the episodes I'm doing, whether it's going to be
nice.
early or late. I'm looking forward to being able to do what the sciencey heck is going on here kind of episode and how do we fix it.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that I'm able to do that and
Yep.
looking forward to it.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. That'll be fun.
All
And shout out
right.
to Jason Griffith, who appreciate all the stuff that he throws at us because I get messages from him periodically. I just think you'd find this cool.
Yep. Yeah, we don't get to see each other nearly enough, but when we do, it's always amazing. It's always fun.
Yeah.
And when we actually get a moment to get on the phone and chat for worthwhile, it's usually about 2 hours of conversation when it's, hey, I got about 5 minutes. So
Yeah.
I love the fact that he continues to be part of my life, my home life, my
Yeah.
family life in meaningful ways, and also continues to be part of my gaming life in very meaningful ways. Because like you, that's how I met him. I met him through
Yep.
gaming, and we've
Yeah.
always been close. And
Yep.
I love the fact that gaming in general and specifically STA is able to help bring people together, bring us closer, keep the people that I love and care about deeply close, and add to that cadre. That's
Yeah.
exactly what Star Trek is to me. It is the way to build community and family and friendship and grow all the good things and cast out all the bad. And
Yep.
couldn't ask for more. Thank you, Griff. Thank you
Yep.
very much.
All right, my friend. I
All
think
right.
that's our show for tonight.
That's the beauty of our new recording platform is I don't get to see how long it is while we're doing it. So that's neat. We are literally shotgunning. We are white knuckling through the stars, baby.
Come on, man.
And I love it.
The two of us are together in a room. It's one of the longer ones. Come on now.
Yeah,
It's one of the longer
by
episodes. We know
definition.
that.
But there's some edits that'll happen, but this is actually pretty clean. So who knows?
Yeah, we'll
But
see.
yeah, I love this game. I love what we've been able to do. Star Trek Preservation is a singular joy in my life, and the fact that I get to share the impetus and the creation of it with you makes it just that much more special. So thank you for joining me on the journey in general with Tabletop
Yeah,
Journeys and in
for sure.
specific with Preservations
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it is infinitely better that it's both of us doing the thing together. When you and I write Star Trek together, it's a special kind of thing.
It's a special kind of thing.
For those of you who are interested, you got to come see us. You got to come see how we play. We run Star Trek adventures on our Patreon. You can join, you can come into monthly games and we run other games as well. Love to have you join us. It'll be a lot of fun. We are looking to expand some of the games as we're filling up our primary table. We will have other tables. We do other games as well, so it's not going to be all Star Trek all the time, but there will be Star Trek available for anybody who wants to play Star Trek, wants to give it a try. In addition, I do Star Trek at my local game shop and local conventions. I just finished up doing a convention this past weekend as we're recording, and I will be doing more Star Trek next month or later this month at TotalCon in Marlborough, Mass. I'll be doing more Star Trek at Rising Phoenix Con, also in Marlborough, Mass. In April, I will be doing more Star Trek at Tabletop Utopia in Hartford, Connecticut, also in April. And I will be doing Star Trek. I'm not sure which session specifically at this stage, but I'll be doing Star Trek at some of the 3 Drinking and Dragons sessions that are coming up this year. And I will likely be demoing Star Trek at Terrificon again this summer if plans go well, if
Yeah.
there are no conflicts. And of course, I will be running Star Trek at Acadecon in November of this year. I had several returning players when I ran in 2024 from when I had ran in 2023, and I have actually locked out the use of those pre-generated characters from STA because they belong to those players when I see them at a catacomb. They are theirs now. And I really look forward to seeing them sit back in the captain's chair and sit back in the security chair when they take over and run that particular crew through these Star Trek Aegis plot lines.
A lot of Star Trek for you, man. Love that.
Oh, yeah. Hey, everybody. Thanks again for listening to us today. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for supporting Tabletop Journeys in the way you can. If you can support the show, the Patreon's a great way to do that, but it's not the only way to do that. Watching us on YouTube is a great way.
Yep.
Listening to us on Spotify is a great way.
Subscribe,
Making
notify. Yeah.
comments. Yeah, making comments is a great way. But one of the absolute best things you can do is share the episodes that you are liking. Share the information with other players, whether it be sharing it on Facebook, or wherever, whatever platform you're active on. Letting people know, hey, I just saw this cool thing is
Yeah.
one of the absolute best ways you can support the show, and we would be
Absolutely.
ever so grateful for it. So, thanks again, everyone. Thanks for choosing Tabletop Journeys, and we will see you in the stars.
Later.
Good night, all.